Good evening, everyone. It is 6:31 p.m. I will call the Tuesday, what's the day, March 18th meeting of the Superior Common Council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Ledeen.
Here.
Councillor Van Sickle. Councillor Moffett.
Here.
Councillor Sweeney. Here. Councillor Fennessy. Here. Councillor Elm.
Here.
Vice President Ludwig.
Here.
Councillor Herrick.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
And President Grasky.
We have a quorum.
Item 3.1 is a presentation for the Blotnick Bridge update by employees of WISDOT, Beth Cunningham, Mark Bowker, and Stephanie King.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. We just wanted to give the council a little update on where we're at with the project. Of course, we've been working diligently with the preliminary design of the Blotnick Bridge, and just wanted to, like I said, give you an update on where we're at with that.
I think it's because we have it open more than once in the background. Why? I don't know. Oh yeah,
This is where we need to be, yes.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So just quick overview of the layout. On the screen, you'll see this is the Minnesota side of the project. And again, when the TPI finishes, the new roads will seamlessly tie into what they're currently constructing. You've hopefully seen this several times, so we'll move over to the Wisconsin side. And one of the things we've been working on is the freeway limits have changed. Now that the freeway will slide right into US 53, you won't have to exit off the bridge to get onto 53. We're updating the freeway limits, which does impact a few things with access and whatnot, but for the most part, the layout that you have always seen is still the same. It's just the freeway limits in the designation have changed. We'll be working on other agreements with the city, working with Todd and Jason and their teams, and we'll be working on the connecting highway limits, as well as some mileage changes on the local road improvements, but the layout itself it hasn't changed since you've last seen it. Here's a zoomed in version of the interchange, and one of the things that we've been working on, we meet monthly with Lindsay and Jason and Todd and their folks, and we've been working on the sidewalks, and we've been working on things such as the lighting, the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer, and just really discussing things that are of interest to the city. So we have been collaborating, even though you haven't seen us here at the council meetings. We are working with your city folks as we continue on the design. So this is a design build project, which means the contractor will be doing the final design prior to the actual build. And there's two bridge types that are still out there. We are not tying down, or we're not determining that bridge type until the contractor gets a hold of the plans. And because of the design build, they will be working with procurement of materials. They'll be working with their schedule. And between the costs of the original build combined with the long-term maintenance cost will help the project team to determine what that actual bridge is going to look like. So this is one option, the tied arch, and this is the option, second option, which is the cable stay. The original construction of a cable stay is typically a little bit more expensive, but the long-term maintenance costs of the tied arch is more expensive. So again, it'll be a combination of the two, the long-term maintenance costs and the original cost, which will help us determine, once the contractors get a hold of it, the project, and lay out their costs and their schedule. So why is this not moving forward? Okay, so a little bit more on the schedule. We've been working over the last several years on the preliminary design. Currently, we're working with the federal agencies on permitting, wetlands. The Coast Guard is very involved on the closure and the timeframes of the shipping channel, not the closure, the restrictions or things such as that. We're working with the DNRs, and we're getting ready for draft release of plans actually in a few months. In June, we're going to give out the preliminary plans to the contractors. They will get a good look at it, but we're still putting together all those final specifications. In November of this year is when we're going to basically release the request for proposals. The contractors will have it from November until June of 2026. Then we'll get the prices, we'll get the schedule, and we do expect the contractor to start building some stuff, not permanent stuff, but building some temporary works that Stephanie will talk about here in a second, starting about in August or September of 2026. At that time, the contractor will be working on the final plans, because they will be having an engineering team do all the final design, putting the plan sets together. We're just doing the preliminary engineering right now. While they're doing the final design, they'll be able to do things such as remove that bridge and do the final proposed bridge. Actually, they'll be designing while they're building. They'll be designing the upper part while they're building the lower part. So it kind of compresses that time frame of the final design and the construction into one. So it is a long construction. We've talked about this before. Hopefully this isn't new to you. But we have done some economic analysis of what it'll take to build this. And we currently feel that at peak, there might be 150 workers out there, which also brings people into the community from a construction standpoint. Because of the design build, we're requiring the contractors' engineering teams, which may be from all over, to come in and actually be here on site. So while there's opportunities for several industries to benefit from this construction, where we do know there's a lot of negative consequences as well, but it's not all for naught. We are bringing in, there will be people here coming that have to build this, that we cannot staff just locally. So that's one of the things that it is a benefit to slightly offset some of the negatives. So with all that, we do know the bridge is going to be closed for a significant amount of time. And how are we going to manage that? Well, in 2019, we've been looking at this for a long time. The MIC was looking at this in 2019, and we studied routes of what happens when the bridge closes. And hopefully you all have seen this exhibit before, but it shows where we're expecting decreases in traffic, which is shown in green, and increases in traffic, which is shown in red. And the thicker the line is where we're expecting more traffic to divert to. Now, of course, we cannot predict where everyone is going to self-reroute, but we do know there will be self-rerouting. But we are going to be trying to improve where we can as best we can to mitigate and offset some of those consequences. So with that, I'm going to have Stephanie talk about a little bit what we're going to do with the traffic and what you're going to see upcoming in the next year.
Okay, so the study talked about several locations, both in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So we'll quickly go through a couple of the Minnesota sites, just because we're all familiar with those as well. As you go over the Bong, the left turn to go onto State Trunk Highway, or Minnesota 35, will end up with a stop signal so that there'll be gaps for that left turning vehicles to get onto Minnesota 35. Then up above Denfield at 8th and 46th, they're looking at a temporary signal to mitigate the traffic that would probably be turning there to get over to 40th to go up the hill to Haynes Road. In Wisconsin, one of the corridors that was really identified was the Winter Street corridor. So we're looking at additional improvements along Winter Street, significant improvements along that street to make it a priority corridor. This would allow for an alternate route and will be signed as an alternate route for traffic to come in and use that route if they don't need to be on Belknap, for example. This will be something that is required by the contractor to do prior to closing the bridge structure. So starting down here, this is underneath the Bong, the Susquehanna ramp onto the Bong. A left turn bay would be added, allowing for also through traffic to move around the turning traffic on Susquehanna. At Winter Street and Grand, a temporary signal would be added with some turn lanes so that anyone that needs to turn north or south at Winter Street. But again, we're looking at timing all these signal locations that are on Winter Street currently to be priority for Winter Street so that this can be an alternate east-west route for the city. An additional location is Catland and Winter, where we'd again add a temporary traffic signal. Both Grand and Catlin will be interconnected with the rail, just like Hammond is, so that no one can get caught on those railroad tracks. Allow for turning movements, and then when no one's there, it would allow free flow on Winter Street. One of the additional locations on Belknap that we are looking at is this location between Banks and Ogden. Being they're short blocks and there's only 3 signals in between, we've seen some, when the Blotnick Bridge was closed already for different work off and on or rerouted, we've seen traffic volumes back up quite a bit, almost to the roundabout at times. So we're trying to look at ways to allow traffic to move north and south on State Trunk Highway 35. So it would be closing the left turn bays onto Banks and onto Ogden so that there's more room for storage for the south and north lanes to go on Tower Avenue, State Trunk Highway 35. Some of the construction projects we wanted to hit quick that's happening this year, they are not directly connected to the Blotnick Bridge, but will prep for the Blotnick Bridge in some cases. Bong Bridge maintenance, we're doing some work up there to make sure it's ready for all this traffic, including lighting, some other spot painting, some surface repairs. This summer, it will be 1 lane of traffic during select times throughout the work. This project is on East 2nd Street. It's a section of East 2nd Street that is 53. We commonly call it Perkins to the Bridge. The north section of the roadway, I can't point, but kind of where Hill Avenue goes under, those areas will be like a thin mill and overlay just to make sure that we have good maintenance, good maintainable roads until the bridge project starts. So that allow us to mill off, take care of the potholes, make sure it's taken care of so they can snowplow well. At the rest of it, south and east of that Hill Avenue bridge, that section is going to have a concrete repair, and mill off that asphalt, do the concrete repair, and then re-overlay it. We'll be shutting the median at the E Street intersection, adding right turn bays at E Street. We'll also be widening Lenroot, or that street that goes between the veterinary hospital and Dave Evans. They'll be widened so there'll be 2 lanes each direction. There'll be some additional work happening on First or Water Street by the concrete plant. That'll also get milled and overlaid, so that loop will be available to go both directions. You'll be able to get off on a right turn. This has been a safety problem for years, so now we'll have a right turn option that will be safer than it was currently. It'll allow people to get on and off of 53 more easily. This will also set up that Winter Street corridor for that alternate route that we were talking about on Winter Street. So this is a little bit about the E Street intersection. Also, what's happening this summer on 105, this project started last year. We did some repairs on a couple of locations of pavement out there. This summer, we're going to replace curb and gutter in Oliver, do some curb and gutter and curb ramps in the city of Superior, and then we're going to mill and overlay the whole thing. Then just on the west side of the city limits there, just before by Calvary Cemetery, there's a culvert there that we're going to exchange and put in a bridge. We were originally going to do this in 2027, but we've moved it up to 2026 so that all that work will be completed by the fall of 26, so that once the bridge closes, if anybody chooses 105 as an alternate route, it will be available and complete.
Thank you, Stephanie. Just wanted to touch, we're here tonight talking with you as the council, but there are some upcoming public outreach, always wanting to get that information out to the folks so they understand what's coming up. There isn't any surprises when we get to it. Of course, there's always unknowns, but we're trying to mitigate that. So we have Downtown Duluth presentation in a couple weeks, as well as we're meeting with the chamber in early April, and then we'll be meeting with the Douglas County Board in mid-April. Now, with that Winter Street stuff coming up, we are going to have another public involvement meeting probably in the May-June timeframe, just to get out there to the public and tell them what's coming up on winter. We'll also hit on those summer projects coming up that the DOT is doing as well. One of the other things we're meeting with is EMS on a larger scale, the EMS, and more of a regional conversation about what happens during construction if we have an issue with the bong or if something goes awry, you know, what on a larger scale we have, so we have people thinking about those what ifs for when we're in the middle of construction. Of course, you can always go to the website and get more information, sign up for the updates. Our contact information is out there. So yeah, please, if you have any questions, just ask. Like I said, we meet with Lindsay and Todd and Jason every month and go over everything that's related to the city. They can bring things to the table. I always have a full agenda of things to talk about, but we can always, you know, discuss your concerns as well. So with that, that's really all we have. And we'll take questions if you have.
Well, first, I actually have one person signed up for public comment, so if you don't object, counselors, I'm going to ask Mr. Dave Miller to come up, if you don't mind yielding the microphone to him. Mr. Miller, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and it's a hard 3 minutes, but I'll warn you at 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. This is the first time with the City Council for a little bit, but I'm here representing Northwest Outlet, unofficially Keyport, and unofficially Super One, but also kind of all of the business in the downtown Superior area here. And I have some real concerns about the no left-hand turns from Belknap onto Banks. There's a tremendous amount of traffic that's going to be flowing through that area, and I understand the stacking issues, but being local and kind of watching what's going on and asking the state to maybe consider some of this stuff, are there other options that might be take a little more thought, but other options to deal with the traffic flow and still allow that left-hand turn as you're heading west on Belknap onto Banks? Be very difficult for traffic. Once you leave Banks Avenue trying to make that turn, you can't go another block and then turn to come in behind. You have to go to the roundabout at minimum and or Duluth if you can't make it through the roundabout. And I do see that with the additional traffic, the roundabout, for all that traffic that's going to be exiting off onto the Winter Street route, that's going to be blocking the westbound traffic on Belknap. And so how can we work to make this a little bit better? A couple of other things that I've observed is one thing is you get a bus that stops kind of alongside of the library, for better speaking, on Belknap. Those buses don't necessarily always get all the way off the road. They stop. You assume somebody gets on the bus right away and off it goes, but it usually takes a fair amount of time for someone to get loaded and that bus to leave. But meanwhile, that's blocked eastbound, one lane of the eastbound traffic. The other thing is westbound traffic. The big backup that I see is the cars that are backing up to Ogden and perhaps beyond Ogden trying to turn onto Tower Avenue. When they do that, they block one main traffic lane for westbound. But the big issue seems to be that the left-hand turn onto Tower Avenue. The buffer that goes on for Banks is more that local traffic that goes in, and you don't have that high volume.
30 seconds, please.
If they block off Banks, then you've got more traffic turning south onto Tower Avenue, and there's got to be maybe a little bit better way to look at it. I know we're kind of short on time here, but I would urge whoever's involved to look at it. I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk about it, because this is something that takes a little bit longer than this. But thank you very much for your time and
thank you.
Everything.
I'll make a motion to extend his time another 3 minutes if he needs it. I was kind of interested in hearing the rest.
I will second that.
So motion by Councilor Fennessy, second by Councilor Sweeney to add 3 minutes to Mr. Miller's time. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. You have 3 more minutes, sir.
Okay. Let's see. We kind of tried to talk really fast there. But to pick up a couple of other things that I see is is the timing of the lights. One of my thoughts, and I know it's not very popular with the state, but potentially is put a stoplight up on the top of the viaduct and use that as the holding area. You do have the light at the bottom of the viaduct, but to hold the traffic, to control the flow of traffic through that Tower intersection and then through the Ogden intersection, right now it tends to get broken up. From what I understand, for traffic coming down the viaduct and going north on Banks, that green turn arrow, depending on how many cars there, that timing changes on the green turn arrow. So it gets longer if there's more cars waiting to turn. I don't know that to be, well, anyhow, I've heard that that's what happens. If the main green light was allowed to flow all the way on through and not be affected, and then mess up the timing for the lights at Tower and at Ogden, I think we would see a little bit cleaner flow. There are other issues with turning, but if we could try and improve that flow going on through there, that would probably get traffic. One of the big problems is cars that are eastbound stop at Tower Avenue and they will completely block the Banks Avenue intersection because too many cars get packed in there. If the light either on the viaduct, let's say, or at the base of the viaduct was holding that traffic before it got plugged up all the way, I think that could help make things flow. Again, trying to do this in 3 minutes is difficult, but I think there are other options that we could look at to make this thing work a little bit better, because that is a major intersection for business between Keyport, Super One, Northwest Outlet, the Board of Trade. You've got a lot of traffic going in. One of the other things is the reconstruction of Tower Avenue from Belknap south. If you were to go to 16th Street, right now you could make a left-hand turn onto Tower Avenue from 16th. That won't be available from what I see for the plans. That's probably a good idea because it's very busy, but there's going to be another traffic issue that goes on there with traffic trying to get in either way. So I apologize for making this short and trying to lengthen it out a little bit, but we're available for questions afterwards. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the DOT folks back up to answer any questions the council may have. Questions from the council? Councilor Allen.
Thank you for the presentation. I've actually seen it at some of the other public sessions that you've had, and I can see that you've been adapting and making it better over time, despite the fact that the bridge will have to be shut down for 4 years. I guess I would like to hear some of the answers to what Mr. Miller had brought up, but despite that, at the city, I feel we will anticipate traffic's just going to go the path of least resistance, and the Billings Park neighborhood is probably going to be one of those impacted neighborhoods. And I'm not on the mix, so maybe this has already been discussed. But what about the concern of traffic going into the neighborhoods? What resources and information will we be having available to prevent that and make adjustments, not necessarily on the fly, but ahead of time?
So, excuse me. Reviewing traffic patterns is something that we have, looked at globally, not just on, the Winter Street that Stephanie talked about and US 2. And we have worked with Todd. We've talked with, the city about these and the potential for where all these people will misdirect and reroute themselves to. And one of the things that we've talked about with the Public Works team is that, we will have, we know what may happen, and some of it is going to probably be reactionary once we figure out where everybody is going to go. But we do know that Billings Park will likely see some additional traffic down there, and it's ways what can the city do and to help mitigate some of that themselves. The department can't solve all the problems. They are connecting highways after all and such, and we are doing our part with doing winter. But yeah, we do know that there will be things that we can't anticipate. But we've talked about some intersections south in Billings Park, and do we do a four-way stop? Do you do extra patrol? Do you do, things such as that? So as we get closer, we're going to have to look at some of those and perhaps give a laundry list of things that the city can try to do to help mitigate that. But people will reroute, we know this. As far as the banks and the Ogden, we've talked about signal timing and how we're going to put that in the contract for the contractor to look at the signal timing, similar with the TPI, where the Minnesota contractor had access to your signal systems and would tweak signal timing as necessary. We're anticipating the same thing. The contractor will be working and doing that signal timing adjustment as needed. We're putting it in the contract that they have to be monitoring traffic. At certain times we expect, when it's going to be a certain amount of chaos when it first opens, there always is with a traffic switch, no matter how much we plan. There's always, on every project I've ever worked on, there's chaos because everyone's like, what do we do? And things will settle and shake out, and then you start to tweak and make those adjustments. We do know we have signal timing modifications probably through the life of the project, depending on the season. What's tourist traffic doing? Is school in session? Is school out of session? So we have been thinking about it. It's just unfortunately we still have a year before we're actually implementing any of it. But it is being accounted for in some of the specifications for the contractor. I hope that's somewhat addressed your
No, that was
question.
very helpful. For folks like those businesses, Northwest Outlet, Super One, and Keyport, what's the best way they can communicate and implement change? I mean, I know that there's a lot of folks involved, neighborhoods and residents and businesses, but can changes be made at this point, and what is the best way to address that?
So we are, we've got a list of names that were that have already reached out to us and said, hey, we'd like to have a meeting. We're actually looking at setting up a meeting in late April, I think, and we're going to set a day and meet one-on-one with the businesses and try to understand, put that out there and have the businesses come in and we'll, talk about it. I mean, Stephanie lives here. I don't live here, but Stephanie lives here. She's very familiar with all of the traffic patterns as well. So obviously that local knowledge is I need it because I don't live here. I visit here. So yeah, we take it all into consideration. Can we solve other problems? I can't stand here and say that there's not going to be pain because we know there will be some element of pain. But what can we do to try to mitigate it is our goal, to mitigate as best we can. And yeah, we'll do what we can. We'll listen. Some ideas work, some ideas don't.
That's why we want to encourage all the public. Each of us can help by, when we don't need to be on Belknap and take that route if we're just going home, can we take Winter Street? That corridor will be redone. We can utilize that option, taking it right out of the roundabout, underneath the Long Bridge, take Winter across if they're commuting. Can we make that so it's easier for those people that need to stop at Super One, at Northwest Outlet, and those other places, have that opportunity because Belknap isn't congested with people that are just commuting back and forth morning or night. Those are things we all have to encourage the public to do, whether we're going to Duluth. Oh, I got to go somewhere in Duluth, and I know I don't need to stop in Belknap, but oh, wait, today maybe I need to stop at BMO or Super One. I know I have to be on Belknap on those days. We can make those choices. We can't make those choices possibly for our vacationers or tourists that come through. We are looking at ways that, I think there's ways we are talking about setting Winter as one of the priorities with
your
ways
app
and means
on
with
your
phones,
phones,
so that it becomes another route that is chosen if traffic is high on Belknap, so that your tourists can make that choice as well, so that we don't sit in kind of gridlock either. We want people to be able to move and get to the businesses. This will still have an option to make those turns into the downtown that way and look at another option of making that maneuver. Is that 100%? No, obviously it's a ways away. But we want to make selective choices to try to make it better. And, obviously we would love for it to work fabulously. But we all know realistically that that's not going to happen, especially the first month out of the gate. I mean, that's realistic. But we all want to make sure that everybody knows that there's another option so you don't have to sit in that queue if you don't have to stop at Super One today or Northwest Outlet. Maybe you do it at another day.
Thank you. And just one more question, if that's okay, is the design of the bridge, the cable versus the arch style. anticipated cost, how much more is the cable style? Because that's going to last longer and have lower maintenance, right? And I know the design's going to dictate that, but like, just is there some high level perspective you could give me on what flexibility and funding sources could make that possible?
The funding is the funding, the federal grant is capped, but we do anticipate, regardless of the style of bridge chosen, that the funding will cover what we're expecting. So the cable stay is perhaps more expensive up front. And when I'm saying more expensive, it's not in, I mean, it's in the millions, but it's not extremely more expensive. Okay, let's say it's not even 100 million more expensive, but the long-term maintenance costs are less because you're not doing the bridge painting if you are on the tied arch. But if the contractor, let's say, comes up with procurement of steel that, he's got a source that it's all Buy America, so it's still meeting all the federal requirements, but if they come up with a procurement method for the steel for that tied arch or something else that, significantly lowers that tied arch cost, then the long-term maintenance costs, plus the original build are comparable. But that cable stay is a little bit more expensive up front than the tied arch, but the tied arch is more expensive long term. So it is going to be a balance of figuring that out once the contractors submit their bids. It's not a low bid situation. This a design build, you get scored on criteria. There's criteria in the design build books that that we weigh, and then we pick a contractor. It's not low bid.
Thank you.
Further questions, Councilor Vansickle.
Thank you. Could you just talk, hi, thank you for being here. Can you just talk a little bit about the shared use path and what folks could expect that might look like and how that might function? Also with respect to it being utilized potentially as a respite for repair.
So the shared use path, we worked very extensively with Todd and Chris on where that would be laid out. We've pulled them away from the roadways, both for pedestrian safety as well as for snow plowing. Makes maintenance a lot easier when the sidewalks aren't right next to the road. They will connect up to the new path that's going to go over the bridge. We have discussed with the, in our monthly meetings, where do we want benches, garbage, things like that. And right now we're sitting in the camp of, kind of let's wait and see what people use the path for. Is there a need for all these benches right away? We don't know that. Some of that is an expense to the city to put that in. We're putting in the paths, but the department isn't necessarily putting in all the bench or park-like facilities. So it will be up to kind of the community to decide how they want that to grow and what they want that to look like long-term. We're building a spoke, or we're building the hub, and you guys will be building the spokes.
Okay, thank you. I've snuck a preview of some of the art from Councilor Ludwig, so I just want to say it's really impressive, so thank you.
Right, the visual quality stuff, right. So that's an element of the project that we're working on to discuss or to throw out there for the contractor, because we do have a certain amount of funds set aside for visual quality. Some of the things that you're looking at, the pretty tree, the big trees, and a lot of that, some of it, I'm going to call it artistic impression. We're still at a functional transportation interchange, and I think that maybe sets expectations a little high with because it's still roadways, but it hopefully, in years to come, if trees are planted, they will grow. But we're not going to end construction, and it's not going to quite be that robust. Yeah.
Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you. My two questions. I'm not diminishing the importance of businesses being affected by the closure, but I'm going to move toward the day the bridge opens. I have two questions.
Okay.
Is the traffic pattern, the quantity, going to remain the same as it is now, or do you see a change in there? And then my question B of that is, are the load limits for the new bridge going to exceed the bong, or are they going to equal it or be less?
That is a very technical question that I don't know that I can fully understand, or that I can fully explain. But the traffic, well, currently with the TPI, traffic on the Blotnick hasn't been normal, in quotes, for quite some time. So we have to go back a few years to see what it was even before TPI started. So when we design the bridge, we had to renormalize traffic on Blotnick, and then you do a projection. And so we're basing our design like 20 years out in advance of what the traffic is. And yes, we expect an increase in the traffic over that, what it is, even normalized if the TPI were done. So yes, we do expect an increase in traffic. It is designed to current standards, and will it be able to take heavier loads than the bong? We just saw the largest load in Wisconsin go over the bong like 2 years ago. And so it is going to be meant to handle oversized overweight.
There won't be the restrictions there are now. It certainly will be designed for oversized overweight trucks where it cannot, a lot of those facilities that we have now cannot allow the turns here, particularly on Wisconsin side, don't allow for even the turning movements, let alone the weights over the bridge. So the new bridge will not have those restrictions at all. Now, what comparison to bong? I was not involved enough in the bong to tell you.
Right.
We're not the bridge people.
The bridge is designed to a certain load. I think the bong is new enough that the standards haven't probably changed too much since the bong was designed to this one, but I'm not a bridge engineer. I'm a surface street engineer, so I can't fully answer that.
Okay, let me one quick follow. That would be fair to say if I said they're going to be equal in weight limits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the traffic will not change based upon going back whatever the years. The bong will still carry
Yes.
more traffic than the...
Oh, will it carry more?
No, or is it going to be equal?
I
Don't know.
I mean, those are always the traffic patterns we can't always predict. If people get used to the bong and it's convenient in certain locations.
No, but
again,
you always project them, whether you're accurate or not is one of...
Exactly.
But we didn't, I've looked at, yeah, whether you're accurate or not or correct, but I don't recall ever seeing after projections of the bong. I don't recall seeing it in any of the reports that information.
Councilor Herrick.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Just a couple of questions for you. One is right now, the Business Park area is, even right now, seeing a lot of traffic going down side streets. And unfortunately, they're not driving slow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I foresee is that, and the reason why they're doing that is to avoid, right now, Tower and Belknap. So they're taking side streets, hitting 21st, or even going up to 28th Street to try to get to where they're going. So one of the things I'm concerned about, again, is the speed. How do we slow these people down? And that's the biggest thing, I think, for the entire project is the speed element of it. Mm-hmm. You know, because people, I don't know, like I drive over the bridge every day to go to work, and when I come home, even going to work at, 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, it's like the Indianapolis 500 there. People are just flying over and back. They just don't slow down. It's like when they come to Superior, then what they're doing is they're coming off the bridge there, and then when they hit the viaduct, what happens there is they think it's an extension of the freeway, so they're really flying over that viaduct too, if they're going that way, if they're not going down this park. So that's one of the concerns I have, right there is how do we slow these people down? I know
that is a universal concern everywhere. We have discussed it. I think we've even talked about, your speed limit, mm-hmm. Those kind of signs. Obviously enforcement is the biggest deterrent, and we all know that enforcement is sometimes not as easy as it's not,
right.
easy to say, hey, go patrol that, right. Because there's 80 other places they need to be patrolling. I think that's something we can think about. Geometric elements of a roadway, it's where people feel restricted is when they slow down. So it's tricky to find that balance, and I don't have that answer. How are we going to slow them down? Because sure. We want to get them through too, So right. It is some of these problems are like you can't have it all, and I don't want to say that, but we can continue to work with Todd and his folks and just see if we can try to brainstorm some other ideas.
Sure. Again, the most important thing is driving through the community itself. Mm-hmm. Then one last question. Would the DOT mind sending the counselors any updates, any upcoming meetings? Could you send that to the council when they
surely can.
When they come about? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further question, Councilor Moffett.
Yeah, my questions I think are about page 23, which kind of went by, I think it was page 23, went by quickly, about some of those local impacts along Highway 2. It talks about the closing of E Street, and at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about increased freeway limits, and I was unclear if you're talking about obviously increased weight limits, right? But also, are you talking about speed limits?
No, it's more of a state designation. So currently, the freeway ends on a city street.
Mm-hmm.
So the freeway currently ends like at 5th. I
Right.
believe the freeway limits go down Hammond to 5th Avenue. And the freeway limits are now not including Hammond, and they go around the corner over to about the 5th Street intersection that goes over to Connors Point. So what that freeway designation does is it limits access to that facility from side roads. And the other thing that it does is it doesn't, just because it's a designated freeway doesn't mean that it's 70 miles an hour. It's just, it has to do with the designation from an access standpoint.
And even the design standards we choose for that curves, you know, the curves that might be on there, the lighting that might be on there, the signs be on there, are all designated as a freeway style. That doesn't necessarily mean it changes speeds or other things.
So it will be 45 still by the 5th Street intersection to go to Connors Point, and then it'll speed up to 55 to cross the bridge. What it really does, this designation, is it allows, by state statute, the department to reimburse the city for the sanitary sewer replacement because of the designation of the facility.
My concern is along the larger stretch. There's a nationwide movement, including our neighbors over in Duluth, that have dealt with highways that divide their neighborhoods and communities and cut off access to the water for poor people and create problems in our neighborhoods. And we're looking at a system here in which we're potentially increasing the speed of traffic and the limiting pedestrian access to our waterways and dividing our neighborhoods from the water. And I really have some concerns that we're moving in the opposite direction that everyone else is trying to get away from. And I understand that there could be some financial benefits for the city to designate it as freeway area in terms of whatever reimbursements we can get. But the city also loses something in terms of pedestrian access. Those people living in North End cross at E Street, and that access will be gone. And, you know, as traffic currently has to slow down when it runs into town, because it either runs into Hammond or gets stuck going around the little loop at the bottom, or a lot of the people really just turn at the bottom of the ridge and cut through the neighborhood, which they shouldn't be doing, but they do. But either way, like, they have to come to a stop there before they turn. And so it creates ways for traffic to slow. This is going to allow traffic to flow more smoothly, but that also means that they're way less likely to slow down before they get to that 5th Street intersection, unless the light is red, you know. And so this is a really great plan to move cars. It's not a great way for people to access their neighborhoods or to access the waterfront, and that's my concern.
And we, you know, that is all taken into account in that environmental document phase. We're looking at, you know, the pedestrian use. We have tried to mitigate that, of course, with the pedestrian paths all around. The path that's currently in the north neighborhood will still connect up, and it's a little misdirection. But yes, you are correct. I mean, with every positive, there is a consequence. And how do you mitigate that? You know, we have to look at it all and put it holistically together. So I appreciate your comment.
The concern becomes, I don't want Superior to be a drive-through where people just cruise right through the community as fast as possible to get to Duluth or to head south. You know, we're building a destination here, and we're working on destination marketing. And so when we speed up traffic along 2, we take away opportunities for people to slow down, enjoy the waterfront, enjoy the museums along there, to see the houses and the opportunity to see, oh, maybe I should turn on Belknap and head into our commercial districts. And so like when we create any opportunity to speed up traffic, we're limiting ourselves as a destination, and we're turning ourselves into a freeway pass through to get to Duluth. And so like there's really a big loss for our community there. And so I guess I'm interested in hearing how we can slow traffic through our city to create a safe environment for people to access the waterfront and to access our walking trails, and in Councillor Van Sickle's neighborhood to access the rest of their neighborhood, what's divided in half by this highway. Because I don't want the consequence of this project to be our neighborhoods when we just get faster ways to move our cars around.
At our, we have been working with Lindsay at our monthly meeting. We talk about the different districts of Superior. It is some things that we come up. We've talked about the signing that's going to be in 53. Do you want this on the signs, or do you want this on the signs? And we look at it as an, I hate to be, callous about it, but it is kind of in this together. You guys were dealt a project you maybe necessarily didn't want. We didn't really want to build a new bridge either, but the reality is that if we don't do something, the bridge will close. And so we all have to kind of work together. What can the city do to help mitigate some of that? What are we doing to help mitigate some of that? The mission and the goal of the Department of Transportation is the safe and effective movement of, transportation. And, the mission of the city is to draw people into the city. Sometimes those missions conflict, and we have to try to figure out how to work together. I don't have the answers to how to do all that, but, it is going to take all of us to be creative and try to think of ways to mitigate it. But
Councilor
yes.
Johnson. I've seen some of this before, so it's a nice refresher, and I appreciate you guys coming in tonight and taking the time to speak to us, so thank you for that. I'm going to echo Councilor Elm and Councilor Herrick's concern being out in Billings Park. I'm interested to hear more about those mitigation efforts, and I'm glad you're working with our team here in the city. One of the questions you touched on a little bit, and I want to hear a little bit more if you can expand on some of the EMS response. So could you touch a little bit more on what some of those plans are moving forward with EMS response, having only one bridge? We all know that, minutes, seconds matter in an emergency response. So can you talk a little bit about what that system is looking like?
Sure, and it's going to be easy because we actually haven't had our first meeting yet.
Okay.
So that's coming up in a week or so. And then,
Good.
Some of this stuff, even with the signing in the community, we expect over the next 12 months, we're going to be solidifying a lot of these things. And one of them is the EMS. We've been talking about it for a long time. We need to have a meeting. Finally, we have that meeting scheduled.
Okay, good.
So we have, the hospitals, even not just fire and police, but it's, the hospitals and ambulances and, emergency response all over to sit down and start brainstorming and coming up with that plan. So in a week or two, we'll have meeting minutes and we'll figure out where our next steps are and where they're going to go, because I don't have those answers right now because we haven't really sat down with the community at large to talk about it yet. So it'll to be determined.
Thank you for keeping that on your radar. One of the other things that I'm interested to hear more and would love to be included on some of those business meetings with, whether it's Northwest Outlet, Keyport, Super One. I'd love to be included on those to try and help access for those businesses, because that is, it's a really tough intersection, right? I think there's no good detour around the left turn on Banks, because if you go down to 16th, you're running into the bus stop that's there. You're running into traffic that's coming off of the bridge and trying to turn right. We're going to get traffic that turns right onto Banks Avenue to try to get to 16th to avoid the lights there, or run down Banks Avenue to get to 21st or 28th. And we're looking at adding some stop signs there to help slow traffic on Banks for that one way. So I'm interested in thinking outside the box on how we can get access to those businesses, because that's, I shop at those businesses frequently, and as a local, and I'm not going to touch on what some of our tourists might want to do or avoid those. I'm just going to avoid some of those businesses at times, right? Like you'd mentioned, like, oh, I'll have to be selective on when I go there. Well, I can't always be selective on when I need groceries or when I need to stop at one of the other places over there. But I'm interested to hear some possibilities, the different detour routes.
We can most certainly include you in on
Thank you.
those. Like I said, April 24th is the date we're kind of looking at right now.
Okay.
We have a regular meeting with the Public Works and Jason and Lindsay, so that'll be that afternoon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Further questions? Councilor Fennessy.
One of the most common questions that I get asked is, and it would completely eliminate at least many years of this, is why don't we just build the two bridges, together? So I was just wondering if you could just touch on that real quick.
So even this one is tricky. We do actually have a handout that we can provide that explains it much better than I'm probably going to do right now. But there is an inherent risk with us driving piles right next to that bridge. I really wouldn't want to be driving piles and something happened to that bridge if we were carrying traffic on it at the same time we're constructing. That itself is a risk. Another risk is if you were to offset it, the curvature to get it back on alignment is very difficult. And we don't just relocate CHS. You just don't relocate Fraser Shipyards. There's only so many slips available for those monster businesses. And so relocation of those businesses is not, where do you take them? Where do you buy another slip on Lake Superior on your waterfront? So that was another factor that came into play. At some point you look at, do we have 3 years of closures or do we have 4 some years of closure? At that point, it's still just a really long time for that bridge to be closed, and are those risks worth it? That's the answer I'm going to offer right now, but we can get that handout. It's on the website to offer perhaps more of those. I was not involved in the team when those decisions were made. I came on just as the environmental process was finishing up, and all of that was vetted out during those more earlier years. But there is risk to build that bridge right next to the old there's a lot of impact. It wasn't an easy decision, but it also isn't risk-free to build a bridge next to an old bridge.
Further questions? It's clear we're going to need to have this conversation again, so I think we'll look to schedule another time. Maybe it won't be at the council per se, but possibly at a Public Works Committee meeting where we can have a bit more involved conversation. You heard several times that there is a regular city meeting that we have with the Blotnick staff. That is not a restrictive meeting necessarily, so if folks have a higher interest or want to attend one or a few of those, let us know. We can probably get you into those meetings so you can have a much more lengthy and involved conversation about bridge issues. But I appreciate you coming to this meeting so that the public can hear answers to all of these. And I think we should probably get you back in a few weeks or months when they have recharged all of their questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3.2 is a public hearing to request comments on community development needs.
If there is no objection, I will open this public hearing. Public hearing then is now open. This is the public hearing on sorry, my link won't work. Okay. Would anybody like to speak in this public hearing? Would anybody like to speak in this public hearing? Would anybody like to speak to the community development needs public hearing wherein is Director Cirque here? I believe this is for, what was this actual plan that we're designing? The name is escaping me.
So we use this as we put our action plans together for our CDBG program, as well as our consolidated plan that we're going to be developing here soon.
Plan.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody want to speak to the consolidated plan? Here none, there's no resolution attached, so I will close the public hearing.
Item 3.3 is a public hearing to request comments on fair housing choice.
If there's no objection, I will open this public hearing for similar plans and programs. Anybody like to speak to the fair in the fair housing choice public hearing?
Would anybody like to speak in the public hearing? Would anybody like to speak in the public hearing? Hearing none, this public hearing is also closed.
Item 4.1 is the approval of the March 4th, 2025 council meeting minutes.
Motion is by Councilor Herrick, second by Councilor Elm. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 6.1 is report from Mayor Payne.
Okay, good evening again, councilors. First, I want to start with a little bit of good news. Last year, I joined the Mayor's Innovation Project, which is a group of mayors that work to develop and then share innovative solutions in city building. And they are partners with the Mayor's Institute on Pedestrian Safety with the AARP, Livable Communities, and Smart Growth America. That was the reason I joined it. They have an annual cohort where they select 10 cities throughout the United States to do a highly intensive effort in developing pedestrian safety within those 10 communities. It's a lot of education, design work, even some potential infrastructure planning and grants. It is a grant, a pretty significant one, and again, it's pretty selective. So I joined MIPS, Mayor's Innovation Project, to apply to join the Mayor's Institute on Public Safety, and I'm pleased to tell you Superior was accepted this year. So for the next year, we're going to do some pretty intensive pedestrian planning, and as a follow-up to the conversation we just had, a big part of my application to that was in reference to the fact that we are about to have some significant traffic challenges through a lot of even totally residential neighborhoods, but also business communities that thrive on pedestrian traffic. I mentioned we don't really know what all of those challenges are going to be, and that they could change throughout the bridge closure. And so that's going to be the focus of our work over the next year on pedestrian safety. I'll try to involve as many of you in that as possible. The only other part of my report, we have a few committee appointments, which I'll ask the clerk in a minute to read the 3 committee appointments. But I'm very excited to announce I have an appointment for you for a Parks, Rec, and Forestry Director. Obviously, this has been a very long process. I asked you to bear with me as we got through first the holidays and then some vacations among our senior staff. But this is a department head level position, and so I asked. For the hiring committee, I asked Director Todd Janigo, the Public Works Director, the Human Resource Director, Cami Janigo, and myself served as the original interview committee. I feel like I'm missing somebody. But for the second round of interviews, the final round, we were joined by Councilor Ledeen as Parks and Rec Chair and Assistant Public Works Director Chris Carlson. Councilors, this was tough. This was one of the most qualified pool of applicants I've ever had. But I think, as you can see from Bridget Marushka's resume, she's extraordinarily qualified, great deal of experience, and brings a lot of unique experiences to the role. We have a long tradition of not exposing staff appointees to questions, but Ms. Marushka, do you mind standing up just so the council knows and can hopefully come talk to you after the meeting? So I'm happy to answer any questions about that process or about her experience and the selection. Otherwise, when we get to that part of the mayor's report. So unless there are questions for me, I'll move on to the committee appointments.
The first appointment is for the Mayor's Commission on Communities of Color to appoint Lori Lang for a 3-year term expiring March 2028.
Councilors, if you have no objection, I'll ask the clerk to read all 3 appointments. We can separate them if you ask.
Next is appointment to the Assessment Board of Review to reappoint Robert Finstead for a 5-year term expiring March 2030, and to reappoint David Strum for a 5-year term expiring March 2030, not 3030.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Grasky to approve all 3 of the committee appointments. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you, councilors.
Item 6.3, Mayor Payne recommends confirmation of Bridget Maruska as Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director.
Motion to approve. Motion is by Councilor Ledeen, second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations, Ms. Marushka.
Item 7.2 is the business of the Public Works Committee with a meeting held on March 6th. Is there a report from the chair?
Yep, thank you. Want to first thank the team from the Superior Douglas County Leadership Group who came to Public Works at our last meeting. Many of us up here have also participated and graduated from that group. This particular team brought a proposal to clarify the jurisdiction and the vision for the former bungee dock at 44th Avenue East. So they had a vision for some signage, some benches. Maybe one day their work can contribute to grants and things like that. So we will, they did suggest we put up some signage that really clarifies that the parcel is mostly publicly owned and accessible to the community. There is still a small area that is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers and a small portion that is owned by BNSF. So they put a little presentation together. We thank them for that. We also want to thank David Pollock, who came forward with a proposal to do some sewer work in Billings Park, and thank them for working with us to fine-tune those details and bring that proposal back. You'll see that the committee approved item 7.2.1 after a request from Douglas County came in to purchase up to 1 credit of the wetland mitigation bank that our environmental regulatory manager, Darian McNamara, runs. As you know, our rates are deeply subsidized, so the approval of the credit will help Douglas County utilize a grant that they got from the state to beef up some stretch of road on Highway Z. The approval from the committee comes at a savings to Douglas County of $130,000 versus buying that wetland credit on the private market. There's also a request from Superior Lidgerward Mundy. Their business is being relocated due to the Blotnick Bridge construction. So the committee also approved this wetland disturbance to help them move their operations. We have some annual contracts for the landfill, some infrastructure at the landfill as well, and updating the slow-mo May resolution just to be a bit more responsive and give the crew more autonomy and direction around those expectations moving forward so that we don't get into a situation like we saw, sort of the perfect storm with rain and things like that. So thank you to Councillor Ludwig, who has continued to work on that. I think moving forward, we have put something of a moratorium on the wetland mitigation bank. Our prices have not been adjusted in at least a decade, I believe, and the committee is looking at developing some development agreements to go along with those mitigation credits because they are so dramatically subsidized by the people. I think we will likely start to put in more elements from our comp plan and our housing goals to make sure that those projects become what they say they're going to become. And finally, you'll see in the minutes that the committee continues to do our work exploring the launch of a municipal lead lines program for a handful of reasons, but mostly because of the substantial savings a municipal program would cost compared to other options out there regarding the approximately 800 residential lead lines. We've identified other communities in a similar situation to us and just continuing those statewide conversations with municipal officials. And finally, if you see Director Todd Janigo, March 25th is his 10-year anniversary being our Public Works Director. March 25th, yes. And he, of course, came from Streets, but as the director, this month is his 10-year anniversary. So congratulations, Todd. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, I will move to approve the balance of the committee's recommendations.
Motion is to approve all of the recommendations of the Public Works Committee. Is there a second? Second. Motion was by Councilor Van Sickle, second by Councilor Dean. Discussion on any of the items. Councilor Fennessy.
I just had a question on the slow-mo May, the resolution. Can someone explain exactly what we're trying to accomplish with the resolution? Because in the last paragraph, that be it further resolved that we will reinstate the enforcement of Section 104-260, but that the last time that I can find that we did anything with that section was back in 2022 when we did no mow May. And was that an ongoing resolution that was supposed to affect it every year, every May?
First, Councilor Ludwig, do you care to introduce the resolution with a bit more length while I pull up the actual ordinance?
Back in 22, when we did slow-mo May, we suspended our ordinance in which that we mitigate when grasses and weeds get over 8 inches and they're not mowed. Of course, we give a warning, we do abatement, and so with slow-mo May, back in April of 22, I believe, we suspended that in the month of May, of course, to give our pollinators more of a chance, plants to grow and our pollinators more of a chance for foraging. Of course, with the early spring last year, we discovered that there are some problems with no mow May because, of course, our grasses grew 18 to 24 inches before June 1st, and so, of course, when the grass gets that long, it's a problem mowing it, and it's also not healthy for the grass for those who like their pristine turf grass, and so, of course, there's more research out there. And so I went online and did some more research. U of M has a bee lawn, has lawn research out there that they've been doing for 10 years as far as turf lawn and bee lawns for pollinators. And so we changed the resolution to reinstate our ordinance back to the 8-inch mowing, so that it will be mitigated, so we can't grow the grasses more than 8 inches long. And so that's what this resolution really does. And it encourages, and it gives our parks crew, of course, direction too. It encourages our residents, to do some research and maybe consider growing bee lawns to help our pollinators, because in looking at some of our lawns, we have a desert for our insects, and so, but also it goes back to, making sure that our lawns are nice looking and that our city is nice looking, and so that's why we changed it. So does that answer your question, Councilor Fennessy?
I don't think so. Back in 22, it was just a resolution that suspended it for 22. If it was an ongoing thing, we would have done an actual code ordinance, but that didn't happen. So the last resolution was a resolution for no mow May in 22 that was for 22, and so here we're reinstating the enforcement that's already been reinstated for the last 2 years.
So I think I half agree with that, because the council's power to quote unquote suspend an ordinance is murky, because generally speaking, enforcement officials from within the city, from me down to patrol officers, have the power of selective enforcement. So we can choose to enforce or not enforce things as suits the public interest. But I've always recognized a general duty to uphold the law. That's the oath, and so I can't just decide that a law doesn't exist. So another example of that is we had sometime last year I asked you to approve suspending calendar parking or something like that, or permit parking for an event, and So in this case, I think I generally do agree that a resolution only exists for the term of the council in which it was passed. That's generally been my belief, but I can't point to any like rule or law that says that. So I've generally taken as guidance. The council said during May, please do not enforce this. I think I have the power to decline to enforce that in May. We would just not send those tickets out in May. And so what this would do is the opposite. I would read this as direction from the council that we want it enforced in May. We're blending the powers a little bit, but this passes, well, more likely whether it passes or not, we're going to enforce it in May, particularly for if we get another very wet May like we did last year. So the true full effect, I can't swear that it has a full effect in law. I think it's a direction and will of the council, which helps us determine how we're going to proceed.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was understanding it right, that it's technically was only suspended for 22. And here we are in 2025 reinstating something that's already been reinstated in 23, 24, and this year too. So
the question is on all of the recommendations of the Public Works Committee. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion carries.
Item 8.1.1 is the business of the Communications and Information Technology Committee with a meeting held on March 10th. Is there a report from the chair?
Yeah, I have a report. So the March 10th CIT committee meeting was all about the progress of how Connect Superior is shaping up. And really one of the big takeaways is the numbers are looking better than ever. The updated budget shows that the costs are coming in lower than expected, especially surrounding the network oversight, saving almost $100,000 according to broadband manager Becken. This is really great news, and it means that we can keep the broadband rates competitive while ensuring the network grows sustainably. We also talked about how take rate is a key factor. We've talked about it here. The budget is conservative, but if adoption goes well, we can expand even faster. That's a huge improvement from our prior estimates, and it means we're going to be building something that's truly sustainable for the community. On the ISP side of the agreement, we finalized the agreement with Advanced Stream and Duluthia Networks, lowering wholesale rates to closer to what it was projected earlier in our studies to help keep the internet costs affordable. We then got into the network operations contract with WIN LLC. They're based out of Eau Claire, and this is going to be an important step as these are the folks that are going to be monitoring the network 24/7, ensuring that there's quick response times, smooth operations, and they're going to catch issues before they become problems within the city. And the city staff and vendors can keep things running smoothly working with them. As the network grows, we'll have flexibility to adjust how we manage these operations. Overall, this was a great meeting full of good news. The budget is strong, expansion is looking more feasible than ever, and we got a solid plan in place to keep things running smoothly. If take rates are good as we expect, we'll be in a position to grow faster and possibly lower rates for users over time. So we're on the right track, and this is exciting news. Connect Superior is coming together. It's becoming a reality. So tonight the council will take action on some of the recommendations. I'm going to suggest that the clerk will go individually, item by item, as if there's any discussion for the approval from that. Thanks.
All right, item 8.1.1.1 is to approve the updated annual Connect Superior budget, including the recommendation to set the annual wholesale rates of service to internet service providers.
Motion is by Councilor Helm, second by Councilor Ludwig. Discussion. Councilor Fennessy.
I've got a couple questions on this. So the last meeting, the wholesale rates were $47, $52, and $55, depending on the three different levels. And now they're $35, $40, and $45 dollars for each respective level. I was just wondering if there wasn't a whole lot of discussion at all at the CIT committee about the logic behind that, the reasoning behind why we can go from charging $47 to $35. So I'd just be curious to hear what the logic. I guess what's changed in the last 2 weeks for us to be able to drop that wholesale rate. That's what it's called, right? From $47 to $35 for the lowest speed, and from 55 to 45 for the 1 gig.
Yeah, if I could ask our broadband manager to help me with this question, with these questions, but I'm going to take a shot at this myself. A lot of it happened through negotiation with the ISPs themselves, because they have to pass that cost on to their customers, and the higher the cost, the higher the final cost to their customers, and they argued that a lower take rate gets them more a lower fee gets them more customers, makes them more competitive. The downside to that for us is it reduces our revenue, of course. But as we analyze it, we had some discussions, myself and the broadband team, as well as with Councilor Elm, about we probably had quite a bit of room, especially if it does have an impact on take rates. So any money we would conceivably lose by lowering the rate, you make up for it with more customers, and the idea is make the network as attractive as possible. Did I summarize it fairly?
I think you did, yes. So that is a very large part of it. So a few other things came through when we were looking at the budget again, which was a really good opportunity, because by then we had the contract with WIN. We had those rates set. That, like Councilor Elm said, that dropped nearly $100,000 from our operating budget per year. That's a big number. So that really did make us take a look and say, what can we do now that we've got more wiggle in our budget? And that means getting better prices to our end users. So we took that opportunity then. In the memo, it also says that the proposed rates that we have now are more competitive for what Northern Wisconsin actually has for wholesale rates. Now, there's not a direct comparison rate that you can find, because we do not have a direct comparison in Wisconsin, right, for our current model. However, we can take a look at what other wholesale rates look like. So our first rates that you saw, they were comparable at a national level. So if you're looking at in the state of Washington that has ISPs through our open access, those are comparable rates. They were a little bit nicer than what Washington state had. But we're not Washington. Over and over, we are not another state. We are Wisconsin. We have to be competitive for where we are and what our community can handle as far as what they can pay for internet access. So we took this opportunity to lower the rates, knowing that it takes longer to pay that back. It does. That's math. It will take longer. However, it does increase our opportunity to have a better take rate, to get more people on the network at a more affordable price, and that's always been the main goal.
Sure. No, thank you. And then the other question I had is probably the biggest difference in last meeting's budget to this meeting's budget is the infusion of cash into the revenue, where you've got $925,000 in going back to 2024, and then $1.5 million in 2025. Just a quick question with that. How can we approve a transfer today in 2025, a transfer that on paper happened in 2024 for a budget that would have been improved in 2023?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you say a little more?
If you look at the agenda on page 212, it's got it's that infusion of cash, $925,000 in 2024, $1.5 million in 2025. And if we're passing this budget today in 2025, how are we approving a fund transfer that's got a line item putting $925,000 in from 2024?
Sorry, remind me, what are you saying it looked like in the previous?
There was nothing in the previous. There was the 2 weeks ago, that $925,000 was missing, and the $1.5 million was missing.
Oh, I believe the answer to that is that because we just hadn't, that's part of why we held it. These budgets were not ready and not fully updated with actual expenditures within 2024. So this projection may as well say actual. I mean, it probably has to be audited yet before we call it actual, but do I have that right? That's 925 is what we spent in 2024.
Nick, is there a different way to explain that? It's the approval from the CIP budget. It's from the CIP budget, so that was that approved amount from the CIP budgets. That's what those are.
And so I guess where I'm just not understanding is how we can approve a budget with the transfer going back to 2024 in 2025. Wouldn't it? I mean, maybe it's all the same, but shouldn't that transfer happen in 2025? I'm not understanding how we can approve a transfer from 2024 of $925,000 if we're approving the budget.
If I'm understanding the finance director correctly, it's because that's the amount that was assigned to Connect Superior in 2024's capital budget, and therefore it's just making sure that those match each other. This is an enterprise fund, so the revenue is just all going into the same pot. It's just accounting for it at the time at which it was budgeted. So when the actual transfer of the revenue came in, that would be, I guess, another way of describing it, but it's all going the same place. And if you did it that way, then it's going to make the CIP look confusing, and you're going to have to answer, like, well, where did that money go in 2024? So it's I don't know the moment at which the money went from the city's general reserves into the actual Connect Superior Enterprise Fund. Most likely, it hasn't yet. It was because we would have needed to approve these amounts. But this is a relatively new enterprise fund, so reconciling what happened when is going to involve some changes as it's developing. Okay. But the money should all just be approved amounts from the CIP, and now it is a revenue budget is a recognition of something that is going to happen or has happened, as opposed to an expense budget, which is a projection of what we think will happen.
Okay, yep. And then once the SLFRF funds are exhausted, then will this enterprise fund encompass everything, the expenses for new fiber being laid, the expenses for the connections going to the homes, like our other enterprise funds are, like the stormwater, where it would all be encompassed in one fund? Because right now it looks like it's like we built it all for free, because that's not being taken into consideration here. But once and I realize it's because the SLFRF funds have to remain separate, but once those are exhausted moving forward, will that all kind of wrap up in one to give a better picture of the operating loss or revenue?
Yes, it is a utility budget, and so everything should be reflected in there. So if for some reason, if money were spent from some other place somehow, we would really have to transfer it in. That's my understanding of how this pretty much has to work. And I mean, to be honest, I am frustrated as I review these budgets that SLFRF has to stay separate at all. I'd rather it be reconciled in here so we can see all the revenue that we're actually working with. But that may happen again. If we get state or federal grants again, those may have to be segregated. But our current and previous finance directors have sometimes found ways to make sure even that revenue shows on the budgets. But if what you're asking is, are all expenses going to be reflected in here? The answer is yes. This is the Connect Superior budget. Expenses related to it should be reflected in here, barring, again, some necessary set-asides if for some reason Staff Beckon starts working for some other department we fund, or a neighborhood improvement fund or something like that. That's always possible, but your Connect Superior expenses should all be reflected in here.
Okay, yep. And then the last question I had on the budget is looking at that $1.5 million transfer in 2025. Mayor Payne, when you presented the budget in October, you described that line item, that $1.5 million, as not to get this budget into the black as fast as possible, but to build out the network further. But which is the complete opposite of what we're doing here. That $1.5 million transfer isn't being used to build out the network further, it's solely being used to get the budget in the black?
No. Building the network out faster is getting the budget in the black. In terms of will these things balance, I don't think this budget balance. This is a brand new enterprise fund, and it depends on how you count that revenue, because we have a giant pot of revenue. There's no revenue coming in other than from the CIP and those grants. But I think you're splitting two different things. This particular budget is really just an expense budget for what we will spend in 2025. The point of adding more money to it overall is so that we can do more construction sooner, because the more customers we get, the more revenue we get, the sooner our total revenues exceed our total expenses. So the goal is to get to that point as quickly as possible. But in terms of, it's hard to call this budget in the red or in the black, because it's definitely flush. It's got all this grant money that's funding it, but it's not generating revenue. It doesn't have customers yet, so it can't be in the black until you get your first customer, and then I think our projections. Our original master plan had, 3-4 years before we see that, and our new projections have that about the same timeline, right?
I think we were looking at around 2029 if we're able to maintain that build-out rate. And all other factors hold still, which goodness knows does not happen, right? That's always a good time. But looking at 2029, if we are looking at holding some factors in stasis and continuing build-out.
Right. I guess maybe just to I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but when you presented the budget in October, you described that 1.5 million as 1.5 million that'll be used to build out the network. Where I see it going here doesn't build out the network. It solely just puts it in the operating expenses. Because if we're going to build out the network anymore, it's going to be with the SLFRF funds. But here, it's not being used to build out the network as you described when you presented the budget.
Well, the operating expenses first. Again, it went in to connect Superior. There are operating expenses and there are capital expenses, and the point of increasing that fund is so we could invest more in capital up front. Whether we had spent that or not, our operating expenses were going to be basically the same. I object to the premise anyways. These operating expenses are building out the network. That is all our staff do, is work on building out the network. But those expenses have to be met, whether you build only phase one or the kind of phase 1.5, the extra backbone and things that we've been working on to allow an easier and lower cost expansion to phase 2. So I don't know that there's a difference in the end between the ARPA money and the money that came from the CIP last year. We have capital expenses and we have operational expenses. The amount we can spend on capital in the early years this year is higher because we put that money in from the CIP. Whether that had passed or not, the operating expenses would have been basically the same.
Okay.
Councilor Herrick.
Yeah, just one quick question. We see the rates at the wholesale price. What's the retail price going to be to the consumers? Any idea yet?
That's a perfectly fair question. We have the ISPs up next. I can't promise you they're going to answer it. I will only pin them down so much, but it's really the biggest question in the entire thing, and it's one of the aspects of an open access network. That's one of the risks that we're accepting in building a public-private network. So we are not an internet service provider. We will not sell the internet to anybody. We are selling it wholesale to these and hopefully in the future other ISPs that will then sell it to the customer. The cost of that is they decide. They set the rate after that. They can mark it up more or less however much they want. The check, I know that would probably make you pretty nervous, but the check on that is, one, customers don't have to take it. They don't have to accept any of it. So it's not like some of the other monopolies that we deal with where you just have to pay what they tell you to pay. You don't like their prices, you're not their customer. If we get two of them on, or especially if we expand to more than two, it's that natural competition that we hope will drive down the prices. So it is worth noting that while we are offering a better product than anybody offers in the city, from the moment that the network turns on, at least in that neighborhood, even if we only had one ISP, they're competing with another provider. There's another people have internet out there. The idea is, one, hope you'll switch because it's faster, and then it's up to them. If they really want people to switch, they're going to have to lower the price. Otherwise, they get no customers. So that's the market pressure that has always been a part of this. You want that they want to be successful. I would hope they want to make some money, which means they need customers, and they're competing with each other and with Charter. So that's a very long way of saying I don't know. But
so that it really hasn't been discussed with the providers.
Definitely has, and I would love to know the actual price. And it's a moving target. But what I've heard so far, and if they answer questions in the next minute, I'll pose it. Do either of ISPs want to say how much they expect to offer retail? If you know.
This is Mitchell Shook here.
Go ahead, Mr. Shook.
I'm with Advanced Stream, and I can tell you that there's a range, and ultimately it'll depend on what our costs are, and those are not completely determined. We're in negotiations with Brightspeed for our upstream costs. So the lower we can, all the costs that we can take out, we're going to lower the ultimate cost. We offer internet for as little as $9 a month for gigabit speed service. In some cities over our natural cost. So, in this case for gigabits 45, so you might see internet for 55. I could see an introductory price that would be less than that. These are lifelong relationships, and I don't want to give away all my, competitive tips, but, we've come to market with a low price guarantee, and this is not a transparent business. Whatever Duluthian's doing, I'm going to have a hard time seeing. It's not always right on his website. There may be a free router or a free month or some low price for the first year that he's not telling me or the public. But, I learn about that with my low price guarantee. And so there's really the invisible hand that you referred to in terms of the low prices. But in Idaho, we started for $5.95 a month for gigabit, and we ran that for the first year, and now that's $9.95 a month. In other networks, it depends again on our cost, but generally I'd say it's about $10 a month over our wholesale costs.
So the other aspect of that is, even if we could answer the question, it could change 6 months from now. If another ISP comes in and changes that market pressure, if one dropped off, there's a lot of pressures on it, but obviously that's the point. You hope that we know what it costs right now for folks that are paying for internet. They know what it costs people for the internet. We have multiple rates at different speeds, so it's going to be a moving target, but the goal is for it to be lower than the current market rate.
Great, thanks.
Mayor, would you add one last?
Just a minute, Mr. Shook. I have to move on with the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
There may be further questions for you. For other questions about the question is the budget. Councilor Sweeney.
I think, excuse me, all costs right now that we're spending, all costs, whether they be classified as rent or salaries, are capital costs. Okay,
There's some operational in the sense we're paying staff.
Right, but they are
contracts.
We're not available to take any revenue right now.
I see what you mean. I would agree with that. Yes, their only job is building the network,
That's
which
right.
I guess would be
They're all
capital
capital costs
yes.
right now. So when will the day, and I realize we have wholesale and retail, when will the day come that the wholesaler, whether we have one or five, will be able to go to their market, which is the retail, and sell their product? So the revenue can come to the city, revenue can come to the wholesalers, if you would. What day do we have projected that would happen?
I don't know if we have an actual. Do you have an actual projection?
This is my favorite question, Councilor Sweeney, because
Well,
it's getting entirely close.
Okay.
It is. I am so very excited about this. I was hoping someone would ask me timeline tonight. So we had a visit from one of our tech companies last week, and they got our business network up and running. So this is the brain of the system. This is what lets us run our provisioning. This is what lets us monitor the system. This is what lets us do the work of the system. Now, at the end of the month, we have Nokia coming on site and putting up the rest of the internal equipment. That is what actually connects the fiber to all of the homes that are going to be joining our network. So the last few weeks we've had Hanco upstairs testing things with their splicers. They've been fixing things out in the field when they find that there was a busted fiber. So they've been fixing things now that it is warm enough to be able to dig on it. We've got light going everywhere. It is entirely exciting. So we are looking at mid-May. So I do not have an actual, this is the fire date, but as soon as we have our ISPs signed up, they will be joining our network as far as being able to set up their pages so that we can have our citizens signing up for service. So we will be starting our list for our drops. We'll be starting to work with Hanco to make sure that they can get out there and get the drops in and get into the households so that as soon as I can turn that network on, which again, mid-May, it's going to be firing up.
So it would not be out of place for me to suggest that by June 15th, portions of it should be up and operating.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is important for me to remind you now that this is a pilot project right now.
Right.
We've built one neighborhood.
Gotcha.
So
Got you. But whether they're a pilot or they're still paying, there's still dollars trading hands.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I just don't want you thinking you get to join the network in June, Mr. Sweeney. Okay. Further discussion on the questions of budget. Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the 2025 proposed budget for Connect Superior, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 8.1.1.2 is to approve the wholesale broadband service agreement with Duluthian Networks, LLC.
Before we take motions, councilors, we have several people lined up to speak in public comment. So I will call them up one by one. You will also have 3 minutes to speak. I will give you a 30-second warning. The first, I believe, is Suzanne Hursted. I'd ask people to say their names and address, please, as well. We have the record, but just so we can make sure that that's correct.
Hi, good evening. My name is Suzanne Hursted. I'm actually the mayor for the city of Rice Lake, and so I live in Rice Lake, Minnesota, 4261 Willard Road.
Thank you, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come tonight to talk to you guys. You guys are at a really cool part, and I love your business model, the open market. I don't remember the technical name for it, but our city had looked at that a few years ago and loved to have done it, but we couldn't afford it. So anyway, I'm glad that you guys are moving forward. I'm actually here tonight to talk about my business relationship with Patrick Malley with Duluthian Network, and so I have a story to tell you. I had met Pat through our previous mayor at a chamber event, and I had been assigned to somehow get broadband to Rice Lake. We had the southern portion served, but the northern portion that was very rural was not served. And so we have, not sure exactly how many homes there was, but the speeds that we have are just terrible up there. And so here I get this project dumped on my lap, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do about broadband. So long story short, we started meeting weekly with Pat Malley, and he met with myself and city staff and just brought us to the basics of the deliverance methods themselves. We learned about all the types of methods so we could choose appropriately for what our citizens wanted. And our citizens were very concerned about spending millions of dollars and then have that product be outdated in a short period of time. That was not something that they wanted to go through. And so process of elimination brought us to the point where we could pick something, and then it was next steps. We got to pick an internet service provider. So we started going through that process of interviewing and locating a service provider that was interested in investing in our city. And then it was time to get the grant money. So all these steps along the way, we had Pat Malley that would come to meetings with us. He would come to the county meetings with us. We were looking for match money in order to just find partners, right? You need match money to get partners to be on board with you. And so him and I and another person, we traveled to Virginia, Minnesota to speak to the county. We received a grant of $200,000, and that was our match seed money that we could use to attract a service
30
provider.
seconds, please.
Thank you. I'll try to move forward. I just also want to talk about the reputation of Pat Malley, because there was a point where he had given us a name of a contractor that could do some technology within our city hall. For whatever reason, this contractor could not complete what he was meant to complete. Pat Malley heard about this, and he just felt that that was his responsibility to complete that and make sure that that project got done.
I'm sorry, that's 3 minutes. I'm going to have to stop you.
Okay, thank you. I think that you guys will be very pleased with your choice if you go with Pat Malley with Duluthian Networks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Sweeney.
I would like to be able to extend her for 3 more minutes, please. This is interesting, at least to me.
I'll second that. Is there objection? Madam Mayor, you have 3 more minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the extra 3 minutes. Let me try to find in my notes here where I was at, and I apologize if I'm going to waste 30 seconds on this. So let me talk about where we're at today, because I think that's the final point that we want to rest on, is that today we are almost complete with our phase 2 of our project build out. And so we received a large grant that benefited us and like 5 other municipalities, that the grant was just all mushed into one. And I don't have the final numbers, but there's like a 51% take rate, and we're not done yet. And so these are rural communities that are connected, and we don't have that density that drives those numbers. And so to get partners and to get money on board, and we had to get state money and federal money, but we're there. So now we're at the point where we can find those pockets within our city that are not served, and deliver to them. So I just appreciate Pat Malley the whole step of the way. He wasn't an internet service provider for us per se, but he knows the business, he has the contacts, he knows how to meet with his customers. He's got great customer service skills. He makes the time to make sure that everybody is taken care of. And I know firsthand, because we went through it, he did not just leave us. We met with him weekly. If you can understand the time commitment of weekly meetings with myself and city staff. And it was a year that we met weekly. I'm looking back at Pat. I don't know. I looked on my calendar, and we started February 21st of 2021. By 2022 is when we received the first grant for our project phase 1. And then of course, 2025 is our completion of phase 2. So anyways, I don't know if I have anything more to say on this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Don't feel bad. They would love to hold me to 3 minutes. But next is Patrick Malley.
Patrick Malley. I live at 4701. I can't even remember my own address. 4701 Vox Road in Hermantown. I am a Duluthian, and I hope to help in Superior. Thank you, councilors, mayor, and friends for being here. This is an exciting point for me in my career. I've been in the internet service provider industry in this region for 25 years. And we started with wireless cards in old Dell computers and antennas on roofs, and all to get around the incumbents, right? To get around the cable providers and the telcos who were holding their customers hostage. And we're here today. Right? It excites me what's kind of lies ahead of us. And I want to thank Dan and Dave Dusek, who might be online here. I think we talked 20 years ago about putting conduit in the ground every time the city opened up a street, and providing that kind of access. Why dig more than once, right? And we talked about that. And how cool would that be? And why wouldn't we do this? And now we're doing it. And it takes a lot of commitment to make things happen. And thank you all for being part of that process. I look forward to what's ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is, it's Dan, starts with an S. I'm having trouble reading the last name. So 2114 Ogden. You'd help me with your last name, sir.
My last name is Streu, S-T-R-E-U. I live at 2114 Ogden Avenue. I moved to Superior from Duluth about 9 years ago, and I got to say, I like your city. When I moved here, I didn't think I would. But you've got a great city here. Your police department, fire department, all good. Shopping's good here, so thank you for what you do. I am Pat Malley's father-in-law. If I could say anything bad about him, I would. But I can't. But he's a good guy. I know him. Known him for about 30-some years, 40 years, whatever it is. Too many years to count. But married my daughter. He's a good guy. But Pat has taught me a lot about internet. For a 73-year-old man like I am, I think I know internet pretty well. I currently have Charter Spectrum. I'm paid $128 a month. And I'm looking forward to having less expensive internet. I use internet a lot. I use internet a lot. I rely on it. I'm also the captain of the Duluth Honor Guard, so I need internet to get my communications. I get phone calls, I get emails, I get text messages about upcoming films that we have to perform at. And I also have cameras on my house. I've worked with the PD probably about 3-4 times, witnessed accidents, vandalism, different things. They're also hooked up to the internet. So I do rely on a lot. That's all I've got to say. So I wish you luck, and I think Pat will do a good job for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is James Hofling. Again, as always, say your name, make sure. Thank you. Greg Fulmer. Bob Finsley.
I recognize a lot of the people sitting behind up there because I sat there for 15 years. And during that time, I was asked, I was on the License and Fees Committee, and we were approached there to change our taxi cab ordinance to keep Duluth cabs from parking in front of our city bars and taking their business away. So we made it impossible for Duluth to provide cab service in Superior. Well, now we've come to the point where we don't have any real cab service in Superior. There are a lot of people that do not use Uber, that do not have home computers, don't have credit cards for one reason or another, and they can't use this thing. What we need to do is find some way to provide cab service to either incentivize a local provider or allow Duluth taxis to come across the bridge and provide service. If you want to get up to the airport in Duluth, if you don't have a ride, if you don't have your own car and you want to leave it there for a week or a month, you're in trouble. You can't get a cab right now to take you up there. I had the experience of, we had a 5 o'clock flight for friends, or family of mine that had to get back to California. They had to be at the airport at 5:15 or 3. So you got to leave Superior about 3 o'clock in the morning and head up that darn hill. It's hard to get a neighbor to do that. You can't get a cab in Superior to do it. Duluth cabs aren't allowed to come and pick up in Superior. I'd like to see a referral to our License and Fees Committee and perhaps the Finance Committee to either rescind the ordinance that I helped provide, or find some other kind of way to provide reliable taxi service, not just Uber or Lyft kind of service, to our elderly or other people that can't provide their own kind of services. So that, it's been, I spoke with a former city employee today at the grocery store, and she'd been in the hospital for a procedure and was not supposed to drive home, but she couldn't find a listing anywhere. We need to provide some kind of information where you can find cabs, and it has to be posted somewhere, since we don't have a paper that people subscribe to anymore, and they can't provide advertising that method. I think I'd like it to be discussed among you counselors and see what you can do to come up with find an answer how we provide some kind of reliable taxi service in Superior. And maybe we have to allow Duluth cabs to come over. They have their license.
30 seconds, please.
3 minutes up?
30 seconds more.
30 seconds. Well, I have a driver's license that's good in Duluth, and they have driver's licenses in Minnesota that are good in Superior. I don't see why we can't do the same for our at least licensed cabs. The city fire police department can still inspect them if they have to.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Apologies, councilors. Mr. Finson actually asked to speak in business by public, and he did write that. He is not confused. I am. Thank you. I put us out of order. So, but I will bring us back into order. I'm the next who did sign up for this issue, which is Stephen Potter, is next. The question again is on the contract for Duluthian. There is no question.
Hi there, Steve Potter. I live at 15 Heron Drive, or Heron Place. The city and the post office can't seem to agree. It's one or the other. But I too am here to speak in support of Duluthian Networks. I've been working with Pat for years for my business, internet and telephone services. I don't have as good of stories as some of the others. It just plain works. You know, it's been good for me all along. I do have one other thought, though. This project has always been presented as an open fiber network. And when I hear open network, I think open to any and all, which brings me to the simple question of why does it require a city council vote to participate in the network? Thank you.
Thank you. Our final person signed up is, I believe it's Kim, starts with a P.
Hello, Kim Parmeter.
Thank you.
Yep. Kim Parmeter, 5590 Stark Road, Proctor, also Midway, Duluth. I can empathize with you, so they're a little confused, but yes. Good evening, city councilors, mayor, and administration. My name is Kim Parmeter. I'm president and CEO of the Hermantown Area Chamber of Commerce. We have 10 bricks and mortar businesses here that are chamber members in Superior, and we have a bunch of residents as well. I'm here in support, to strongly support Pat Malley of Duluthian Networks and their work with the city of Superior. I've had the privilege of knowing Pat for over 7 years, and in that time, I've seen firsthand his commitment to excellence, his dedication to his customers, and his passion for strengthening our local business community. Pat's not only a highly skilled professional, he's a kind, hardworking leader who truly cares about the people and the businesses that he serves. As a former board member of the Hermantown Area Chamber, Pat has always understood the value of supporting small businesses, fostering economic growth, and working collaboratively to improve our region. Duluthian Networks has been at the forefront of expanding fiber connectivity in Superior, working closely with the city to develop a city-owned and operated fiber utility. This initiative, backed by the ARPA funds, will bring fiber to 1,100 homes starting this spring. That's pretty cool. With the goal of eventually reaching every residence, more importantly, it creates a fair, competitive marketplace where multiple providers can offer service, ensuring that there's better options and improved access for residents and businesses alike. Pat and his team have already invested significantly in this project with the establishing of the new Carrier Hotel in Superior, a move that will help eliminate bottlenecks and improve regional communications infrastructure. And it's been fascinating talking with him about this project. Duluth Networks is not just another provider. They are a true partner in the city's future, and they are local. I know relying on their services, many businesses that are chamber members that have relied on Pat's services, and he's really built a strong reputation for reliability and customer support and innovative solutions. So Pat Malley is definitely the right person for the job. He has the experience, the vision, and definitely the passion to make this project a success for all of the residents and businesses of Superior. So I urge the City Council to support Duluthian Networks and move forward with this critical investment in Superior's future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nobody else has signed up. Would anybody else like to speak to this question? Okay, hearing none. First, councilors, what is your pleasure on the adopting of an agreement with Duluthian Networks, LLC?
Motion to approve.
Motion is by Councilor Moffett, second by Councilor Ludwig. Discussion. Councilor Fennessy.
Would it be proper for me to ask Mr. Malley a question?
That's up to him. Do you mind answering questions? Welcome.
Yes, how you doing, Pat? Thanks for coming. So in my limited understanding of your world of things, you can kind of boil it down to maybe, there's probably more, but keep it simple. There's kind of two different types of ISPs. There's the facilities-based, where like Charter is the one who's providing the internet, and then there's the resellers, where a reseller ISP would basically resell Charter's internet. Is that like on the very high level the two differences?
Yeah, the SCC defines it two different ways, right? Okay. A facilities-based provider is one that provides the actual physical network.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
That is essentially what the city and the ISPs that are riding across the city will be. They'll be a facilities-based, right? The city is building the facility to deliver the services. And in the other, like you said, option two is you're selling somebody else's network. Mm-hmm. So yes, okay, you are correct.
Perfect. And so up until now, you've been a reseller of the internet, different companies, whatever.
Correct.
And so this would be the first project, the first customer that we hook up on Connect Superior would be your first customer from a facilities-based venture.
Correct.
Can you, with this being somewhere in the range of a $50 million project, if it was completely built out, that this being the fairly new realm for you, can you just kind of speak to that?
Kind
of the transition and what that looks like.
Yeah, really. For me, the difference isn't significant in the way that my daily operations work, right? In this case, the only other person that I have, normally for my customers, I'm their advocate within the industry, right? So I work with Charter, I work with Lumen, I work with your Brightspeed, right? Lumen, CenturyLink, all kind of the same company. I will work with whatever provider is providing access to my customer, right? And I will make calls on their behalf to make sure that their service works, right? In this case, I'm still escalating those calls, but I'm escalating them to the city, to the NOC, right? With who I have a direct internet or direct connection via fiber, the most reliable and fastest and whatever communication mode, if you will, right? So now since we have an interconnection with them, it eliminates all kinds of questions and all kinds of intermediaries, if you will, and 800 numbers and all those fun things. So it makes my job a whole lot easier than it would normally be.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thanks, Pat.
Before I send him back to his seat, does anybody else have questions for him? So I'd like to let him sit down.
I've been sitting down a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Further discussion then. I got it. It's all. Further discussion. Hearing none. The question is on the approval of the contract with Duluth Networks. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. The motion carries.
Item 8.1.1.3 is to approve the wholesale broadband service agreement with Advanced Stream Broadband LLC.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 8.1.1.4, award the Connexperience Network Operations Center contract to Win LLC, a 2-year renewal agreement for an initial cost of $16,200 with monthly reoccurring charges of $6,210.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 8.2 is reports without recommendations. At this time, are there any further committee or commission reports to be made?
If there are none, we can move to new business.
Item 10.1, Finance Director Reinhardt recommends approval of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of up to $836,253 of sewerage system revenue bonds series 2025A and providing for other details and covenants with respect thereto.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Grasky. Councilor Herrick.
Yes, I don't know if I missed it in the readings, but what project are we looking at for the $836,000?
I'll have to pull it. Sorry, I'm in the wrong spot on my agenda. Can Director Janigo answer that faster than I can?
Hammond Avenue. It's for the Hammond Avenue work. We have a principal forgiveness loan, so we got to take out a loan in order to get the principal forgiveness.
Okay, don't go away because I'll have to ask you probably the same thing on the next question. So.
It's the same answer.
Okay, all right, thanks.
One sanitary sewer, one storm sewer.
For the same area, okay, all right, thanks.
Councilor, did you have other questions, Councilor Herrick, or discussion?
Nope, thank you.
Councilor Sweeney.
This loan is probably more of a financial question, but is it 100% forgiven?
It may not be forgiven at all. We've applied for principal forgiveness. We have a high success rate for principal forgiveness.
But
we do not actually, hope I'm not wrong about that, we don't actually budget for the principal forgiveness. We actually budget the full cost of repaying the loan, which can make the wastewater and stormwater, more the wastewater than the stormwater, but it can make it look pretty out of whack if you don't know that's actually kind of a lot of money that floods into that account later.
I do want to apologize, Counselor. My brain's a little mushy today from staring at grants all day. But I might tag Steve Robertson on the call here. Do you know if he knows the principal forgiveness amount off the top of his head? The other thing I'll say is, regardless of the principal forgiveness, there are always low interest loans coming in at 2.2% at 20 years.
Right. My only other...
Director Roberts, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I believe these were eligible for 30% principal forgiveness. I'm not 100% certain if that's 30% of the values listed on the page or if that 30% has already been accounted for separately.
And I can answer that. This is full value of the loans without any principal forgiveness.
Why do we backload this?
In the event we don't get
principal paying the larger amount toward the end. Why are we backloading it?
So these are reimbursable loans. So we actually have to do the project and show progress before they are willing to release any of the funding.
But the interest is not forgiven, right?
The interest is not forgiven, no. So they forgive, basically, I believe there's an initial funding that they do. We have to do part of the project. And when they do those distributions is when they actually do the principal forgiveness. So they distribute it in two parts. They distributed it as a loan part and a principal forgiveness part, or a grant is essentially what it comes down to.
But the part that's on here is not forgiving, right?
This is the total for everything.
Okay. I'm still wondering why we backload it, make the payments larger toward the end, will indicate we'd pay more interest then.
No, it doesn't affect the interest because it's a drawdown loan. So the only time we're recognizing any principal on the loan is when we draw it down. So let's say we did $50,000 of the project. We're going to request $50,000 from our Clean Water Fund loan, and let's say just call it 50-50 for the sake of easiness. They're going to give us a distribution of $25,000 for a loan and $25,000 grant, and you're only accruing interest on that $25,000.
As we draw.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? This is, as long as we're on the subject, you may have heard in the last couple weeks, we've had conversations some at committee about are there any funding streams that we worry about from the federal government, and this is one of them. This has been an extremely lucrative program for the wastewater and stormwater systems. Right now, it is funded. It's largely run through the state. They have the money, so we should be good for the next year or so. But it's one of those things that ultimately ties to the federal government. But for now, it continues to allow us to do pretty significant investments in our utility system. Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.2, Finance Director Reinhardt recommends approval of resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of up to $1,360,344 of Stormwater System Revenue Bonds Series 2025B and providing for other details and covenants with respect thereto.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.3, Human Resources Director Janigo and Environmental Services Director Roberts recommends confirmation of David Pollock as Environmental Services Division's Collection Systems Engineer and Operations Manager.
Motion approved.
Motion is by Councilor Van Sickle. Who made the second? Councilor Herrick made the second. I've been asked this a few times, councilors. You will occasionally see non-department heads on your agenda because city policy is all supervisory staff require council confirmation. And Mr. Pollock, I hope will be a supervisor in a few minutes or seconds. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of his confirmation, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Pollock. Do we have any further lawful business? Any business by the public? No. Reminder, our next meeting follows Election Day and is therefore a Wednesday, April 2nd. I will see you all then, and we are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.